the privacy of personal, confidential, or secret data. These laws frequently include specific security requirements that organizations must take to protect their data. In addition to security measures are necessary to prevent data loss or leakage, which would result in violating laws. Not only must organizations must comply with these data privacy law, industry regulations, but they must also demonstrate they are in compliance. With a growing number of privacy law and frequent changes, maintaining compliance is becoming even more difficult, and non-compliance can result in hefty fines. Hi, my name is Ranjit Mishra. I work as advisor with DSCI. I'm here to introduce you to the speakers today from ForcePoint and Hitachi, who will take you through the fantastic topic about data security and compliance. We have Mr. Brijesh Meglani, who is principal consultant APAC of ForcePoint. We have Deepak Kaul, who is senior security consultant India and SARC ForcePoint, and Vivek Gupta from Hitachi Systems. So I would request all the speakers to come on dais and Brijesh to take over the dais and take this masterclass and workshop to take you through his deep perspective.
Thanks, Ranjit. Thanks for the introduction, and maybe close this podium mic. So I'll call Deepak Kaul also along with me, and in the next 65 minutes we'll run through you from this agenda. So this will be the agenda that we'll be covering. Definitely focusing on these 4-5 aspects. What are the trends that we see overall in the data security? And just to make it a bit interactive, please feel free to contribute from your side. How we can build a strong data security compliance strategy or a data security policy within your organization. And what are data security everywhere? So I'll introduce to an approach which we believe will the way to solve the problem, the modern problem, which arises from multiple things. In this session, we'll also decode the 5 steps of data security life cycle. Within those 5 steps, we'll also talk about certain real-time scenarios. You as a CISO or a DPO, what you see as an execution strategy on ground. And then we also have our partner who are with us from more than 2 decades, which introduce how this can be executed on ground with the concept of a virtual DPO and a virtual CISO. So with that, let me start and set this stage to focus on what are the data security trends. So before I start, what you see as a data security trends, primarily within your organizations, I'm sure that here the mix is more from different domains. So anyone wants to say what are the data security trends that you see in your organization or overall? Okay. I hope you guys have a breakfast or good tea, coffee, but let me start then. Okay, so the one thing which we typically seeing is definitely data security, and as Ranjit mentioned, it's also taken a shape of a privacy across the multiple globe, and now India has its own DPDP Act. But what are the things that we have seen previously from a data perspective is we also always want to secure data with some tools and techniques, right? And there are multiple products which has been deployed over the period of time, which typically make it more complex because the connecting or talking of those with each other are the factors of it. Along with that, what we have already also seen that there are new techniques of the data breaches which we have started seeing. Now, in the transformation, we have seen the people are moving to the cloud. And when the people are moving to the cloud, now data breach is happening overall to the cloud applications as well. Apart from the breach, the other thing that we have seen is the zero trust, right? Zero trust comes into picture, and now we want that data security should go and adjust with the zero trust security model. We'll go a bit deeper into it, deep dive into it, but how we can go and implement this zero trust from a data security perspective. Then cloud, we all know that the cloud has been adopted not just as a SaaS, but also as a AISS platform and the other custom applications that you go build in any cloud workloads. So cloud is also typically there. It means that now you have your data there. Now those data can be your application data. Those data can be your users data. And last but not the least, there is a hybrid workforce. Now, maybe I didn't got anything from side, but so I'll bring back to you, Deepak. So what do you see as a hybrid workforce look like? Because everyone is talking about now transformation which has happened over the period of time. What's your view on that, Deepak?
So, if you look from the pandemic perspective, the organizations had to make their workforce work from their home, right? Now, how do you ensure the data which is within their laptop, desktop, or their personal devices? How do you ensure that the security is imposed or you have the policies enforced on those laptops? So a new approach, a new transformation came into picture, Brijesh, wherein people had to use a new technology, new means, as well as need to trust their employees. Now, now that has shifted to a paradigm what we refer here something as work from anywhere, but ensure that you have a trust on the person as well as the data which they are using. So the technology, or we can say, as you know, companies are saying you should come back to the office. So you have to have some balance between the data, the security, and the ease of our work-life balance. That's what I think is greatest challenge for the any organization which is there.
So now some of us we treat this as a challenge, right? Yeah. Anything we want to add? So can we have a mic? Yeah. So we'll be covering the zero trust piece of it. How this will goes together with this. Maybe if you bear with me another 5 minutes, we'll cover the zero trust piece of it. But the point which Deepak rightly mentioned here is that looks like a challenge, but that's an opportunity, right? We have seen that it's an opportunity for our organizations to grow because they have gone to a new model of consuming an application. Now, if I go 10 years back, 12 years back, we were all saying no to cloud, right? How many of you use cloud nowadays in any means? Right? Around 50% still use. Some may use cloud, but they don't know that they use cloud, right? So some of you may be using it, but you don't know that maybe you are using it. So similar way, this transformation also happened, right? So during a pandemic time, we all understood those who think that cloud is not the best approach, they are not left with any other approach to go and use cloud. Now, when the cloud comes into picture, definitely during the pandemic time, people started working from anywhere, right? So there is no means of going and working from office. Now, definitely it settled down to a hybrid, as you rightly mentioned. But the point here is, if your people are working from anywhere, you are consuming a cloud, do you still redirect your all traffic to your data center? How many of you redirect your traffic to your data center at this point of time to consume an application which is there in the cloud?
Or which is a SaaS based application.
Yeah, or which may be a SaaS based application. Yeah. How many of you backhaul? So if I'll say backhaul means I want to access an Office 365, which I can go and access directly, but still I will VPN back to my network and then say the Office 365 will be only open from this door. You use it? Yeah. Okay. So because you see that I have invested a lot in my data center, all the security devices are there. So that's the secure path, right? We'll decode few of them in this discussion. So now when the cloud is there, when the users are moving there, definitely the data is also there. Okay. So data is not only in on-premise. Now, apart from this, there are definitely the study which has happened talking about multiple CIOs from an analyst, and they talk about that there are other drivers of the data security risk. Definitely, ransomware extraction, double extraction is the one piece which we all are facing, and now that's the reason you are consuming now different technologies, moving from an AV to an EDR to an XDR to an MDR kind of a solution. Intellectual property theft has also increased, right? Both internal and external. Now, internal, where you talk about insider threats, where you talk about whether my internal user is getting compromised. Digital transformation we talk about has been accelerated over the period of time. Cloud security and a cloud DLP is the one where most of the organizations are now focusing on. When we go and meet any of the CISO and CIO, I think Deepak,
I just wanted to ask you, how does cloud security and cloud DLP go into hand? I think that will also answer the zero trust part of. Can you a little bit explain more on that?
Correct. So Definitely. So first of all, switch over to a zero trust. I'll just cover it. That zero trust is not a product. It's a security model. It's an architecture well written in NIST 800-207 publication, which clearly said there are certain principles of this security model which needs to be incorporated within a product or within your components. Now that's talk about adaptive in nature. It should not be static. It should be dynamic in nature. It should be context driven. Now that context may comes from a risk factor of that particular attribute. And then it has to be continuous in nature. It should not be at a one time. Okay, so if you are implementing these things, and that's what we will see during period of time, how we'll cover the risk, how we'll cover the trust, how we'll focus on the continuous factors of the nature, and that's where it will jointly build your cloud security strategy, your data security strategy, as well as the cloud DLP is a one piece of it. Now remote working another, and then this is the one thing which I think most of the SOC thing is struggling, where they say, I want to effectively implement GRC mandates for the data layer. Now we all build a SOC keeping in mind that we will have millions of logs coming from the SIM solution, multiple logs coming from an AV and all, but how I analyze and track it with the governance and governance risk and GRC models perspective. And now we are talking about a data access governance, right? In data
I just like
privacy
to I like to ask you one question on the GRC front. So it says governance, risk, and compliance. Yeah. So what should come first, governance or compliance? Very simple question. Governance, risk, and compliance. Usually, governance should come first or compliance should come first. That's the wrong thing. That's why I said. So the technology, the methodology is that you need to have some governing body first. Then you need to identify the risk. Then you need to put a compliance in place. Normally, usually in the practice in an organization is you do first compliance, then you look at the risk, and then you do the governance. So the methodology has to be GRC. That's why it is GRC. It's not CRG. So yes, yeah.
So now, before we kick off to the next session, we all understand that yes, data is a strategic asset, correct, right? And it's growing exponentially. With the applications, with the mobile applications, we have seen the data has grown to multiple fold. And every time, after a certain period of time, the data is not used. Now, tell me frankly that those who have switched over maybe multiple organizations, maybe some of you are there in organizations for a long time, always take a data into some drive and say, usko use karenge kabhi, future mein. Right? But how many of us used it? Right? Not at all. So data has also an age. Okay, and we have to understand that after a certain age of time, the data may not be relevant. Okay, so we'll discuss on redundant and outdated and trivial data, what is the best way to handle those kind of a data as well. And then data protection requirements has definitely has the other challenge in terms of our skills, right? And that's where we now focusing on analytics tool, more monitoring capabilities and analytics capability piece of it. But one thing which we have understood over the period of time, the data exists in two formats, one which will be there on premise with you and one which will be there on cloud. So the technology should be there, the approach should be there, which will solve my hybrid environment. And then data and cybersecurity looks different, but at this point of time, they have to converge. You can't say that you want to put a data security, but your data security is only as good as for on-premise, and you have moved to the cloud. Now you can't say that your data security is good to have, but is not helping you in attaining a compliance of a DPDP. Right? It should not be a checkbox within a factors to it.
Brijesh, one question to the audience. Why is data security and cyber security totally different? Any idea? I think they are same as per my understanding, but if you can help us to identify this.
So and I get to know from Jagdish, who is our marketing guy, that we have some certain goodies. So please feel free. Any best answer will get the goodies also.
Why should be data security different from cyber security?
Why should it be different?
Why is it different? Or why should it be different? Why is it different?
Cyber security are different.
Different. Why?
From my perspective, cyber security is overarching, and then data security is I don't see
okay.
them as different.
Okay, you don't see them as a, but we have written as a different. We have to justify it.
Data security is served over
Cyber security is the security of the overall infrastructure. Data security talks about the data encryption part, and all those stuff is actually data security.
Okay. Anybody else? All our answer are good. There's no as such.
Yeah, but you have to choose the best because
Yeah, yeah.
we have a
Yes.
goodie.
Correct.
And cyber is the environment in which we are protecting it.
That's
Yeah,
the right answer. So
absolutely.
data is the
And we
you
have
can
a
say the legal. If you look from the legal angle, you are the owner of the data. Any breach to the data is your responsibility.
Okay, ma'am.
Cyber security is more into the securing your infrastructure, putting antiviruses more into the threat perspective, while as data is the business perspective of your own. Sorry,
Yeah.
the data is your business perspective on which the business runs.
Ma'am, what's your name? Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. So all answers occurred, but more precise was ma'am's answer. This data security is you are the owner of the data. You have to protect that. Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Let me move forward. Now, how to build a strong data security compliance? So let's start with certain compliance as you
Yeah.
mentioned.
So if you look from the, as I said, GRC, governance, risk and compliance. So if you look from the compliance perspective, organizations have to secure their data in some format or some way. Why? The reason behind this is because that is where your business runs. If you do not have the relevant data or if you have corrupted data, you may not get the correct analytics, you may not be able to make the correct decision. Now, when we talk of the data, there are two specifics to the data. One is the organization data which you are using, one is the data which you want to consume. That is the employee data, the customer data, the other data, right? Now, people or the organizations to increase their business are misusing their this kind of a data. So you may have received some, say for example, spam calls. How did their phone number get into to those people, right? So from that perspective, government has come with certain regulations and certain guidelines and certain compliances which are to be met by the organizations. So the recent one is your DPDP A23. Now here it is clearly mandated that the organizations have to secure their data. They have to erase their data based on the consumer's request. They cannot keep that data forever and use that forever for their business purposes. Now, one of the important thing which is there are monetary implications if there is a breach or if there is a misuse of that data. Similarly, we have the IRDA also. These are more of guidelines. This is more of law. So if you do not comply with the law, there is a high penalty, I think 150 crore or something per data breach.
200.
Sorry, 250. And very importantly, you have to have some kind of a governance model. That's why you have DPO, Data Protection Officer, right? You need to have a chain of command within that which may report to CEO or other top board of organization. And very importantly, if there is any breach, you will have to report it within 24 or 48 hours of that. And the implementation, this act has to be implemented within 2 years of time. That's what I understand from the law. Yeah. Anything else?
So definitely we understand that yes, there are certain guidelines. Now, data privacy for India, definitely a new act. It's not new for the globe. Every country, in 2018 when GDPR started, that was the first enforced privacy act across the globe. And then definitely after that, California has CCPA, their own privacy. Southeast Asia, every country has their own privacy. And that's where now we are also landed into the privacy piece. And we will go and decode how we can typically go and cover this with some certain approach, right? And that's what we will be covering. But before going into that, let's understand what should be a building blocks to build a data security posture, right, within an organization. So let me first start with identify your data assets, right? You should understand your complete business is running on which core crown jewels, right? What is your core data on which your organization run? There are n number of data which you are consuming in day out. But what is your core? Maybe for a manufacturing, their research and designs based on which they typically manufacture an equipment is their core. For a biochemical, their chemical formulas are their core. Okay. So for every industry, they should have identify their data assets. Once you identify, you assess the risk. Because without assessing a risk, just securing anything do not make any sense. And this typically we discuss when we discuss with multiple customers. Customer says, okay, I want encryption, I want to encrypt everything. But why? Because encryption of data is a cost, right? So you should have a mechanisms to assess what is your risk and see what is the exposure of that data. How the risk will get to know. When you know the exposure of that data, how the data is getting shared, how the data is getting consumed, who has the permissions of that data, then only you will get to know the risk associated to it. Now, this definitely data classification, and every time when Forcepoint as a company which is there now 20 years in India says, boss, are you do data classification? Do you do data classification? It's a tool. Tool definitely help you, but it's an approach. It's a strategy. It's a policy that you have to build. So you'll say, I typically follow a data classification procedure which will help me in classifying my data into a different categories, maybe confidential, private, public, internal. And now I want to automate it. I need certain tools to automate it. So what is the core? Core is your policy. Core is your strategy. And then after you get to know the risk, you have defined the right labeling or a right value to your data classification asset. And then you will say, I will put now controls and user permissions. And controls and user permissions also needs to be flexible, and that's where zero trust also comes. We'll say, should I give an implicit trust or I will do an explicit trust? Should I go and check 2-3 things before I provide a data access? And that's what a zero trust one principle says. So you should have access controls and user permissions. But this typically in any organizations over the period of time has increased. We all read, learn, certified in CISSP and say, boss, when the question comes, we'll say least privilege access. But when we see in an organization, over the period of time, if I'm spending 10 years in an organization, I have all the access. Okay? So we have to follow into those principles. I'm going maybe very basic, but these basics typically build this all strategy over the period of time. And then definitely whatever we have to encrypt, I have to encrypt it, whether I am doing an encryption in data in motion, whether I am doing an encryption at data at rest. Okay, encryption and a secure transmission. Now secure transmission to the cloud, if I'll say how I securely transfer the data through a cloud. How we do nowadays? Maybe through a SharePoint, maybe by using some rights management tool to make sure that document should expire over the period of time. It should not be print ready. It should be only read only. There are different mechanisms of doing a security transformations. In an email, how we do it? We'll say send an email, it should be encrypted. Only an intended recipient will be able to open it. That is also an example of a secure transmission. And then incident response and breach management. So with all the things that we have done, will it assure 100%? It will not. Still maybe an incident will happen. Still I will go into a state where I have to recover. But if I have a right incident response and breach management, then I will able to recover back quickly, right? Where now CERT and everything is focusing and supporting the MSME and other organizations, it's to make sure if you breach, I'll make sure you will recover over a less period of time. If you breach and if you are reporting within 72 hours, you will not be penalized because you have done a due diligence, due care, okay, to secure that kind of a data, and definitely breach management. Now all these things typically in the end user side, you will say, boss, I have to build a SOC. SOC लगा दो, सब कुछ साफ हो जाए, सब कुछ खत्म
शॉक हो जाएगा.
ठीक है? Definitely I leave it to Vivek to talk about those things, but this will not solve the problem. So these are the building blocks which you have to always keep in your mind when you are evaluating a product. when you're evaluating a services, will it helping me in understanding these building blocks or not? Anything, Deepak, you want to add?
So I just want to add up on what Brijesh mentioned is, if you look from all the five boxes or five tiles here, what do you think is most important of all? As a simple question. Yeah, yes ma'am. Identifying your data. What else would be the second point? Risk. No, you are just telling what Brijesh is telling now. Sorry, everything is important. Okay, so if I want to my take on this, every answer is correct. There's no bad thing depending upon the organization. For me, I know first five tiles are important. For me, this is much more important because this is where my DPA will come into picture. Now this is where I will come to know whether there is a breach or not. You may have put all the controls in place, plus minus some percentage, but at the end of the day, as a CISO or a DPO officer, I need to understand what are the threats what are the outside people who are trying to access my data. I need to understand in case there is an incident, how do I respond to that incident. Now incident management is a kind of a core of what you all do. Every organization will do this some part here and there, but this is where some people lack. They may have SOC, they may have SOAR, but the incident which is actually important to you, it has to be identified. Actual incident which allows you, which may breach or which may do a ransom attack. For me, from my perspective, this is more important because this you will automatically do, or you may be already following it. Say for example, those people who don't have SOC or kind of an environment over there, this is important for them. Yeah.
Okay.
I hope you agree with me somewhere, somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
So now,
Yeah.
typically if you see whatever we discussed in the last 15-20 minutes is we want to attain some type of a data security compliance, right? Absolutely. Because that's where you will get the budget. You will say present to the board, sir, PCI DSS नहीं करेंगे ना तो auditor
Penalty.
लगा देंगे, right? Then, as you mentioned, zero trust, right? Everyone wants to implement a zero trust because it gives us assurance, right? It will make sure that we are not giving an implicit. We are explicitly trusting people. We are maybe using a multi-factor or whatever the technology to implement it. And then we all landed into a hybrid or a cloud world. Now, which means that we need an approach to enforce this because we all are standing on this intersection point. Agree? So now let's go and decode this.
Yeah. So, okay.
With data security everywhere and approach. But
yeah.
Before that, a question. Right? So now I've talked about building blocks. I know a few of you has clicked the photo. So without looking onto your phone, what are those stages?
Yeah. Sir, I would request you put your name first.
Yeah,
Yeah, that
maybe
will be
put your
helpful.
name.
I am Vinay Vishwakarma from Certain.
Okay, great.
Identifying the data, then risk management, then.
So you mentioned certain. So I'll make sure that you will not miss anything. Because if certain miss something, it will attack to an organization, right?
Yeah.
Tell me.
So identifying the data, then risk management, and then classification, access rights, secure storage and transmission of the data, incident response.
Oh, absolutely. Maybe you can pass him on to him. Thank you. Now let's go to an approach of data security everywhere. Now we know what are the three roads. We are on the intersection point: hybrid cloud world, zero trust, and ensuring data security compliance. Now let's decode it with the data security everywhere. Deepak.
Yeah. So just can just play. Okay. So when we talk of any data security, right, the importance is that where the first, as Brijesh mentioned, where the data is residing, how it is being used, and who has access to that data. Right. Three important points: where the data is there, who is using it, and how is using it. There are other what, where also, but typically, if you look from the data security perspective, the first thing you need to look at is the discovery, which is to find or to know where your data is there. Where is within your system the data? For example, Brijesh also mentioned that there could be a lot of data which is residing. So a person who is within the organization for a longer period of time, his laptop will be full of the data, right? And that he or she may not be using it, right? Now we sometimes refer to as hoarding of the data, not actually the term, but hoarding of the data which is within the organization within on your laptop. So first thing is to search for that data, that is discovering where the data is residing with your organization, because as Brijesh mentioned, rot, redundant, obsolete and trivial data which is of no use, right? Depending upon the data retention policy within the organization, you need to remove that data because that could pose a risk to your organization. Then the endpoint, email, network and web. These are the 3-4 channels through which the data can be exploited or intentionally or unintentionally. So endpoint is for your desktop laptop, the email channel, whether it is cloud or on premise, which is on premise is very less today world, network sharing within the network, and the internet as such, right? It could be your SaaS applications also. Now we come to the last point, which is cloud. Now cloud is a very big term. Even SaaS, PaaS and ISS all are part of cloud. Now how you search that data on that cloud, that is very important, because you see a lot of breaches have happened because permissions were not there for that particular, say, Amazon S3 bucket or whatever storage you are using. So we need to take care of all these channels, we need to take care of all the storages to ensure that there is not a breach or the data is not being misused. And I think you can click, there is one more line, I think, yeah, custom applications which is there. Your own applications, your own storage, your own databases. How do you store that? How do you analyze that data which is in these custom applications? Yeah.
So definitely now, if I say from a layman language, if I'm using these channels within my organizations, I want the data security to secure me over these channels, right? And that's what my approach will be. Now, how to go from this approach is where we move from DLP to a data aggregator. Okay. In a DLP, we have always a limited channel, web, email, and endpoint. That's what traditional DLP do. And data security everywhere talks about each and every channel. Now, what is the strategic path of our data security? And that's where the zero trust comes into picture, right? It's definitely a principle. Now, zero trust also talk about a maturity model. Now, zero trust talk about the 5 pillars of zero trust maturity model, that you should implement a zero trust on identity. You should implement zero trust on applications. You should implement zero trust on network. You should implement zero trust on your data, and you should implement zero trust on your user. Right? These are the 5 pillars of a zero trust security model which CISA talk about. Right? So zero trust is definitely one guiding principle for whatever the approach you will follow, whether it's on-premise, hybrid, or purely on-cloud. The other thing which typically simplified the hybrid and a cloud delivery problem is an architecture. Now, I'm sure you are aware of what that SASE is, SASE, Secure Access Service Edge. It's a service edge. It's an edge which is closer to user, right? It's a closer to user. How closely you enforce a service edge to enforce a guiding principle of zero trust. Okay? And after a secure access, what do you do? So, for example, if I give you a secure access to an application, what do you do after connecting to an application? What do you do?
What is the crux when
What
you
is
use
the
an
crux you
application?
do with that application?
After
For example,
that-
I give you connecting to a SAP application or a Salesforce application. What do? Usage of a data, consume a data. So which means once you have a zero trust principle with a simplified architecture, because SASE has simplified the architecture. SASE will make sure that if you are going to internet, if you are going to a cloud application, if you are going to your private application, it's a common intersection point where you can go from to any road, and we'll give you a ticket to make sure you have a secure access. So once you go and access it, you focus on data. So that's where the data still present on the center point of it. Okay, and that's where the zero trust then only not only talk about it from one layer perspective, it's talk about zero trust access. When you're accessing something, zero trust needs to be enforced. Can any one of you give me an example of a zero trust access over the internet? Firewall whitelisting. It's not, it's a one time.
So if you're accessing an application
Hmm.
and you have a certificate authentication or some sort of biometric enablement,
Hmm.
and then you also have
That's an identity based zero trust. I'm saying zero trust access, or maybe I'll say zero trust web access. Take an example.
Maybe the dependency of NTLM that we have.
That's still auth.
Two-factor.
That's still authentication.
So if the data resides on the
Sir, there's a lot of light. Focus on us. So if you can.
Okay, so zero trust access is when I know I'm going to a site, but I don't know whether it's good and bad. Okay, so I allow a zero trust to that site in some isolated container. Now, if I tell you the term 3-word, 4-letter, you'll say yeah. It's a remote browser isolation. Now, everyone know remote browser isolation. But if say what the problem that remote browser isolation solve is my zero trust web access. Right? So we all into a cyber security, including us, is all always focusing on 3 letters and 4 letters. Right? RBI, ZTNA, SASE. Okay, but it's solving me a zero trust web access problem. Now, zero trust data is when I am giving an access control of data based on user behavior. When I'll say this user over the period of time has a good behavior, let he go and access that particular data. I don't have any problem to it. But if over the period of time his behaviors become risky, he started doing certain activities which show on his timeline suspicious, malicious and all, I will restrict that access. That's also a principle of zero trust, which says adaptive in nature. Risk adaptive in nature. So there is a risk which coming from user, it move from static policies to an adaptive policies and maybe block his access. And that's what zero trust data is. And we'll show you some beautiful videos to maybe interpret it. Now, zero trust usage is definitely what he's using. Maybe he's using data, he's consuming content, he's consuming other factors of it. And zero trust content is very unique. Maybe Deepak, if you want to cover the zero trust content.
So now, how do you access the content which is there on your, say, for example, one part could be the remote browser isolation, right? One could be the code sanitization. So let's take an example. I will just take the RBI as an example. That's much easier to explain as far as the content is concerned. Let's take an example of you are accessing a web page, typical browsing a web page in day-to-day work. Now, how do you ensure the code which is executed on your laptop is safe? Is there any way? No, it's not there. You can't predict what code is being downloaded in the background or what information is downloaded in the background on your laptop to ensure that you have HTML2, HTML3 and Web2 and Web3 rendering on your page. So when we talk of content as such, we need to ensure the content which is coming to our place is not having any malicious intended program into it, right? There are a lot of, for example, let's just give a phishing link, right? How do you ensure that the phishing link is, you are accessing that link, it is not a phishing link, and if it is a phishing link, it has to be securely rendered. So how do you do that? Let's take an example, you have a website which does not have an SSL certificate, proper SSL. How do you ensure that it becomes read-only? Right? So content is where it comes into picture. So RBI is a platform, as Brijesh mentioned. What it does is it containerizes that particular page either on your premise or on the cloud. Now, when it containerizes that page, it just executes that page or downloads that page exactly there, and then transfers the outcome of that to your desktop laptop. What it means is it does two things. One, sanitizes your page. Second, sanitize the code which is within that. So any executable code will not get executed on your machine. Thereby, I allow you the zero content. One more thing I would like to add, Brijesh, here is I hope you have heard about the IOCs, right? Something. Okay, what is that? I know that. What is that?
It tells you that whether this code block or the signatures are detected elsewhere else, and that can lead to some kind of harm to your system.
Compromise. So basically, incident breach management tells us that these are the certain logs, these are the certain activities based on or events. Based on that, there is a possibility breach or there is a possibility compromise, right? Similarly, when we talk of all this approach, there is something called as IOB, indicators of behavior, right? Now, when we talk of indicators of behavior, as Brijesh mentioned, how are an individual within the organization using his or her data? What are the how effectively, how ineffectively, or what is he doing with the data? Is he trying to upload some data to a website? Is he compressing that data and putting into a pen drive? Is he, when I say he, I mean both he or she, okay? He or she is trying to put some post on a LinkedIn or onto a Facebook, or he is uploading to a cloud storage, to a personal storage. That is where this all this comes, indicators of behavior come into picture. So as Brijesh also mentioned, risk adaptive protection, the indicators of behavior.
So before I move further, I'll give you a very simple example of zero trust content. Do you know steganography attacks?
Yeah.
How it happened?
So steganography happens that you are uploading a picture or you combine your code behind a perfect training code or
So how you will get to know that the image which is coming to you do not have a malicious code at the backend?
usually we use IOCs or common signatures. The platform when it is converted into the code, we check the signatures of that code.
Yeah, but image with a malware do not says that this MD5 hash will be malicious. So what technique you require? So you require a technique which will make sure I'll get an image. This image will be bleached, so there will be a bleaching mechanism which give me an image with all these active codes removed. Okay. Now the technology in the backend is again a three-letter word. CDR. Now what that CDR is? Anyone?
It starts with content, that I can say.
No, it's CDN.
That's an, sir.
Content disarm and reconstruction.
Absolutely. So what's your name? Ajit. Ajit ji. Thank you. Do you want to explain what the CDR do?
Yeah. So basically, whatever content you are getting through your Word or PDF file, it basically segment your document first and then reconstruct after removing all the malicious code.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's the only technology which makes sure that you are getting a content which is 100% malware free, because it's getting created at that point of time. Okay. As simple as, I was discussing with someone says, do you know how we have used fax? Fax there is no connectivity, right? You put a paper on the other side of the region and you will get the same printed on this side of the region. So if you see, it's a bleaching mechanism, right? So let's move forward and let's move to the 5 steps to decode a data security lifecycle. Now let me explain what that data security lifecycle which we want you to understand within this session. So as Deepak mentioned few of them, these are the stages from which the data has to traverse within his life cycle, right? So one, definitely when the data is there, you want to discover that data, and you can in your mind visualize it with the building blocks that we have studied, so that you will able to correlate in a better way. So discovery is where you discover the data wherever the data is, whether it's there on the endpoint, whether it's there on the on-premise network, whether there is on the cloud repository. You go and label that data and you do a classification. Now classification for data in use, which may be an agent sitting on a user machine, user driven, it may be an AI driven, it may be for data at rest, which is your historical data, you want to do that. Then you want to prioritize it. Now how you prioritize? Can you tell me? If I have 5 things mentioned, written here from a data point of view, which data I have prioritized? What should be the attribute that should I take that, oh, I want to prioritize this? Sorry? Risk. Definitely based on risk, we have applied a label. So if it's already labeled, definitely we can take that label. So risk play a major role in prioritization. Okay, so definitely it has to be context driven. It has to be risk driven. Then protection. So protection to make sure that each and every channel needs to be protected. And that's where the data security everywhere concept needs to be fit in. And then monitoring. So monitoring talk about your incident breach. Reporting back within 72 hours. Right? So once you do follow these 5 steps of data security life cycle, you will able to protect your data which is spread across everywhere, able to safely provide an access to people who are working from anywhere, and definitely it needs to be unified, AI driven and all that piece of it. Now in the next 15 minutes we will go and decode this one by one. So first is the discover. Now in a discover, what we do, as I mentioned, we do an endpoint discovery, the data lying within a user machine. And if you ask me, before the SharePoint and all, every data was there in the user machine. Right? No one was putting that on the backup storage and say, we'll take a backup. ठीक है कि copy रख देंगे, छोटा कुछ रख देंगे, but most of the things was always there in the laptops. Right? So endpoint discovery is the one. Network discovery, which talk about your file servers. Cloud discovery, which talk about your all the flavors of cloud repositories. Those can be your S3 buckets, your Azure blobs, your SharePoint, your OneDrive, your G Drive. And then what you see along with that in the discovery is the permissions. What is the exposure of that data? Okay. And how this typically go and correlate, and I have taken maybe a one simple example to match it with the DPDP piece of it, is one, you have a data everywhere which will help you in discovering the data everywhere, both in a structured and unstructured, because still definitely the unstructured data has increased over the period of time, but definitely there is a structured data which is there in your SAP, ERP, database systems. Described and learned over the period of time with machine learning and AI based algorithms. You will use certain file tags if you classify and scan it. So data is, we all know, is not very easy to find, right? You need certain templates, certain ways to understand it. And then indicators of theft, right? So now we talked about 3 things: IOC, indicators of compromise; IOB, indicators of behaviors; and IoT. It's not that IoT, indicators of theft, right? So data isn't just lots, right? It can be stolen too. So it's not always data leak. It can be data theft also, where it's malware driven, malicious and all. And that's what we have certain products focusing on it. So we will go and cover one by one, give you a view how these solutions look like, how this typically, whatever we have mentioned, how they will go and focus from that approach perspective.
Yeah.
So,
So what you see here is, we have a video after this. So what you see here is the visibility part of it, the discovery. See, when you are trying to put any, say for example, we talk about say risk, right? But we need to know, if you are calculating the risk, we need to know against what we are calculating the risk, right? So for that, you need to have some kind of a visibility into the data which is lying around your organization. So data discovery view, which is here, is the visibility which is stored on your desktop, laptop, share, cloud, etc. That's why it is trying to show. No, but the screen here talks about the different aspects on which you will score that risk. Now, when you are doing a risk analysis, you have to have some kind of a benchmark. So, for example, you can say CIA values are this, legal liability is this, non-repudiation is this. So, you are calculating that risk value. Now, here are the compliances, there are the categories on which you create that risk profile or you create that discovery profile. So, next, yeah. So, you have to play. So here if you look at this point here, we are trying to look from a data visibility perspective. We are just looking at different ways, or for example here we are talking about a data share which is being which is to be say for example we are scanning the data. Now once we do that, you can see we can even classify that data. So if you are scanning the data on a disk, then you want to classify or tag that data based on the compliances, based on the classification. For example, it could be sensitive, low, medium, sorry, internal, public, that data over here. So that's what it, now if you look here, let's go, it's okay. So here you can see, I think it's slow.
It's slow.
I think, yeah. So if
No, it's there only.
yeah,
So yeah.
So yeah, here
you can cover.
yeah. So here what we are talking about is that simple visibility. Now if you have 3 something, so here this tells you whether you want to scan that data, whether you want to put any tagging on that data. That's the basic infrastructure or the basic dashboard which gives you the information about how do you find the visibility into that. So these are different ways of but you can do that.
Yeah. So that's a pure agentless.
That's agentless,
right?
very
Where
important.
you don't want, I want to do an SMB shared path scanning.
Yeah.
I want to do a OneDrive scanning. I want to do through an S3 bucket scanning.
Correct.
So via an API, you scan it. You understand what type of a data line. You will get to know the exposure of data with the permissions assigned to those files. And then if you want to go and say classify, at that point of time, it will be classified to a certain labels based on your labeling structure.
Correct.
Okay.
So with agent, so what happens is you can see just an overview of it here. Now these are the compliances on which you want to classify the data. You want to discover and that the data is it just now. If you see here, you are just scanning the data. You can see it's running as of now. So the once you start the running or the discovery of that data, you can see different incidents which are coming over here. You can see the endpoints over here. The entire information about that particular data, when it was created, who created it, where it was lying it, which location it is, and the forensics part of it. Forensics in the part in the sense is say this document, what is this actual document? I can just pick that up and create in a forensics value. So that's what it is. So if you look, it's just one more, yeah. So you can see all this is the forensics part. Here you can see where the data is. If you go a little bit down, you can see the history when the data was used, how it was used, that all information is given, and there are the dashboards which are also available from the agent discovery. So if you are having the agent, both agent and agentless, people do not want to overwhelm their desktop laptops with the agents. So typically you have 13 to 14 agents running on the desktop. So we have both agent as well as the agentless discovery of the data.
Correct.
Plus the sensitivity.
So same way, agent will make sure that if it's running in a laptop, it will go with the less memory space, less CPU utilization, scan when it's running as an idle, all those parameters you can set. But the point here is it help you in discovering what is in the laptop. It's mainly used by many of our organizations which focus on, okay, if I have an R&D laptop and they are working on some critical work, they're not storing any copy and pieces of those within their machines, right? So that can also be used. Now the second piece is classify, right? And in the classification also, we have to emphasize of what type of a data, right? So one is data in use. When I'm creating a file, when I'm storing a file, when I'm saving a file, I want to enforce a classification, right? Which typically for any data which is generated now at this point of time, right? Because maybe previously you don't have. Now data at rest, where data is already there, historical. Now you can't go and touch your data at every point of time. You will only touch the data which your user is using. You will only touch the data which your application is using, right? So there should be a mechanism to do a classification of your data at rest. Then your data in motion, if the data is going over an email, if a data is going over a web, it has to be classified. It makes sure that it's go and take that classification to the next layer. So that when, and that's what we typically see, that when we receive a mail, we'll say the email tag as a confidential, email tag as an internal. Right? So that's typically an email-based classification. And the one unique thing which typically drives us on this data classification is an AI. Now is AI typically is an artificial intelligence will make sure, and that's typically has changed over the classification industry, because previous versions of classifications was very static in nature, because they were typically built on regex. They'll say, okay, PI regex looks like this, PCI regex looks like this, okay, and that based on that the classification was focusing on, and that is the reason it has too much dependency on a user to rightly classify it. And if user is not classifying it or over classifying it, that's where the project typically go on hold, okay, because classification is a bigger piece from our overall data security strategy. So what we focus on is from an AI piece of it. So we'll say that we use natural language processing, we use entity recognition, we use neural networks, we understand what those machine learning models are. We have seen that different organizations are using different set of sample documents. Based on that, we train the models. So we know that in this document, is this a PII related document? So we'll say 80% of the content in this document is PII. And then we can enforce a suggested classification rather than user driven classification. Okay, so that's typically has changed the game or eased this data classification strategy from execution perspective. Okay. So now the third piece is prioritize. Now prioritize, as you rightly mentioned, risk. Risk is the ways to prioritize it. But if I'll go and do that, how we need to understand our data better? And Deepak, maybe if you want to share how we can understand.
So we talked about the risk, right? Now when we talk of risk, there are multiple risks which are there, but there are two major risks which are there. One is the organization wide, another is the individual wise. So as an individual of first point, what is the risk I can pose to the organization, and whether the organization has an appetite to absorb that risk. For example, we talked about the Adani, say for instance, where they were able to take the adversary risk into their business. Now, when we talk from an organization perspective, we need to understand what are the departments within the organization, what each department can pose a risk. So for example, we have HR, we have technical, we have business documents, we have marketing documents. Now how do we ensure the data which we discover, or we want to prioritize on that? So first you discover, then you prioritize. When you prioritize, then you look at the risk and the permissions which are there. Which I think we need, So here, this is the demo which we talk about data classification. Now, as Brijesh mentioned, over here is the AI part of it. So the greatest or the most difficult part of from an user perspective who is not tech savvy is to understand what should I give the classification. As Brijesh mentioned, AI provides you the idea, the suggestion that this could be what 90% of PII. So the user is aware that this is PII. And the second part of it is, again, you can see here. So this is the endpoint which we are talking about. These are the different compliances, different regulations which are there. Based on this, when you select them, the user will get the suggestion. So if this is the endpoint classification. So when you open a document, it will automatically suggest you what should be the classification label. So if you look here at the top right, so this is not classified. So if you click on that, okay, so there is no classification label. So typically the classification label is stored in a metadata of a document. So you have properties where it talks about the author and etc. That's where it is stored. So you can see here, it is when you click, it's automatically saying it is GDPR PII and it is internal document. The user simply has to say set, and that's it. It will automatically get embedded into the document. That's the beauty of the product. That's the beauty of the solution when you do a classification.
Yeah. So the prioritize is the one which definitely talk about a risk. So we talk about a data risk, we talk about a user risk, we talk about content risk, and definitely one thing which we focus on is 4-point security index. Now, how a data risk typically looks like. So when you go and adopt the solution, it typically gives you a visibility of what is my risk score from an endpoint perspective. How much of my endpoint carrying a data which is maybe more PII related, okay, which is more compliance driven data lying in a machine. Access risk score taught me about that what are the repositories and shares which are publicly shared, okay, which typically has a high exposure. So based on that, I'll get an access risk score. Risk audit score talk about me the different layers of risk factors which comes into picture, and then definitely a dynamic risk score. So one, this will give you a data risk score based reports. The other thing, it will give you an analytics based reports. So when you go and consume it as a part of a data security everywhere, it focused on how much I have adopted, how much of my cloud repositories has been integrated with it, how many of users have installed those agents from a compliance perspective, how many of data breaches I'm seeing, and based on those data breaches, how much dollar values I'm saving by consuming this point of it. So that will give you a user or a data or analytics based rule. And then you will typically get your user risk reporting. So you will say, my user over the period of time has been classified into a different risk category: critical, high, medium, low, and what they have done over the period of time. Deepak.
Yeah. So basically what we are talking about is the indicators of behavior or indicators of risky behavior from the user's perspective. So if you see here, the graph and the dashboard over here gives you an idea about who could be the probable user who could exfiltrate my some data. Now when we talk about the risk is also about the behavior of an organization. Okay, so this demo, which is we call it as risk adaptive protection, gives you an idea about different users. You can see you will see a lot of clickings here, but I'll just summarize in here. So what you see is I need to look at a behavior a user is posing within my organization, right? What does that mean is, Deepak as a user, is he trying to access a storage which he or she is not supposed to access? Is he frequently accessing his personal accounts, personal storages? Is he uploading his CV onto a LinkedIn, say for instance, or a job profile, right? What is the duration between each? Because if I have to leave a job, I will try to do things very fastly. I will try to bulk download the data and zip it into drive and save it on the pen drive, right? If I have let's suppose we are in sales, we will try to from the sales force, we will try to extract the customer base, right? If you are in the manufacturing, I will try to exploit the designs. If you are in the biochemical or bio industry, you will try to steal the formulas, right? Now we have seen, I think recently there was a case where in the 5 people, 2 in Chennai or 3 in Bangalore, right, where they stole the data by changing the passwords, right? This is what it gives you an idea. So if there has been that's why I say incident management and incident breach management is important. So this gives you an idea about the behavior of that, and you can take the action accordingly. So if I say the user is trying to say, as a Deepak, I am doing that something which is not as per my behavior, I will ensure that he gets stopped. I will ensure that he does not upload the data. So there could be when we talk of an incident, it is the amount of the breach which is there. Okay, incidents are always there, but what is the amount of the breach? What is the amount of the data which is gone? So let's take an example. You will always say, if I say 3 personal records have gone, will be anybody interested? No government organization will be interested, no other organization. But if I say 1 million records have been exfiltrated, then it becomes an issue. So the volume which is being exfiltrated, this will help me to stop that. So if I'm trying to say exfiltrate 10 records, it will observe my behavior. If I try to do again 10, then it will stop me. So that's where you are trying to do a breach management part of it.
So it's an insider threat technology which makes sure that it will timeline you, baseline you, captures all the outliers, see whether you are outlining through your own department within organizations, and typically plot your timeline over the period of time. Now the fourth one is a protect. Now protect, where we talk about data security everywhere. Go to that slide, focus, memorize all the channels which we need to protect. We need to have a technology which focuses on advanced data protection techniques, machine learnings, OCR, API driven. Any cloud application should be consumable, because I will develop my own custom application as well. I will not only restrict to the outside known applications, and it has to be compliance driven to drive this. And go back to the same thing. If I'm covering a risk over the period of time, which what you have seen as a wrap, my user actions and my protection also should along with it. So if the risk is not high, let business as usual. If the risk is high, then definitely I need to take a consent and all. And then risk has to drop over the period of time. It should not be constantly increasing. It has to be decay over the period of time, and that's what typically focus on risk adaptive protection. Now the data security everywhere with the SASE architectures will also make sure that you will able to enforce the data to your cloud, to your internet, now to a generative AI, okay, to make sure that if I'm using an application, a generative AI application, then the data should also be, make sure it should be secured while consuming a generative AI application, private application, email, and in any terms of a source. It can be a user sitting in office, it may be for my VoID user, or it may be for my remote users, and it has to be have a data controls, architectures for a SASE, risk adaptive, and definitely enforcement. Now enforcement means if I am on premise, it has to be enforced on premise. If I'm on roaming, it has to be enforced on cloud. It has to be closer to my user. And that's where it says secure access service edge. Okay.
Okay, so what we are here demonstrating is that how do we ensure that the people who are using the box and how the data is not exploited, and how do we ensure that when we scan the data we also protect it. So this is the video where somebody is trying to share a data. You see, she's trying to share a data from the box perspective, and how do we protect it. So it's a little bit long video. So basically it just gives you an information on how do we see, for example, he is uploading a data onto this box drive, or sorry, OneDrive, and then you will see that how do we protect that data on this. Yeah. So now he is trying to open it and then to share, I believe. Yeah. So we are blocking it. Yeah, you will see one more slide here where we try to download the data. So he or she will not be able to download the data on his personal drive. And if he downloads it, there will be some watermarking saying that this document you cannot download, wherein this is highly secure kind of a thing. Yes.
Yeah. So you can define a policy saying if it's my own sanctioned application, I will able to do everything. I will able to upload, download to a managed machine and all. If it's an unknown application, I will should not able to. If it's a internet, I should not able to. Okay, so those kind of a segregations you can do with the data security everywhere piece of it. Now the stage 5, which is monitor, which talk about how I can report a breach, how I can understand an incident. So your data leak incidents needs to be there. Your user behavior view, because you need a timeline to understand what user has done, your permissions view, and then definitely your cloud posture in terms of your benchmarks and all is also come into picture.
Yeah. So this is a beautiful slide and this is a beautiful video which gives you an idea about the data which has been discovered. So we talked about the agentless. This is an extension to that what we were discussing. So it just gives you an idea about what is the data which we have discovered using running a scan. So if you see here, it is like I'm just filtering on a one IP address. I can see from this is the source where I found out. Now what is important is I need to know the permission who are using this data. So if you click, you can see all the people who have access to that one single file. So if I scroll down and I use multiple things, I can see that. I can even generate a risk report which you have seen in the earlier slides from here. So for example, it's a GD, so many reports we have downloaded, but you can see here the risk report, which is the analysis report, the risk part, the user part, the historical data, what are the files which we have done, what is the size of the file, and all that stuff can be done with a single click. That's what
so
is the
TB of storage which you have, it do a scan, give you a view, tell you the exposure, tell you the risk before you go and take an action of what to classify, what to protect and all. Now Deepak.
Yeah, it's a big slide, lot of information on that, but what is important is that when we talk about any regulation which comes into picture, when we talk about any guidelines which are coming into picture, we need to understand the three things which we already discussed: governance, risk, and the compliance. Now, since most of the organizations start with the compliance and then move to the risk and the governance, so here what we are trying to identify is how do you ensure that the infrastructure where the data is being stored, the infrastructure where the data is being processed and used, how do you ensure that one, it is discovered, it is identified, it is classified, and you have the visibility into all the components which are at the top of the slide. Then we need to understand who is using this data, how he is using the data, risk adaptive protection, for example, how he is using data, what are the risks when I give a access to somebody else. That is where the data flow and comes into picture. Then this part, this is the human element, this is the human element, that is the technology element. Human element is who, what, where and how. What are these elements a user is trying to do? For example, you can see the graph over there, the orange line. So based on the techniques a user using, I can take an action on that particular usage of that data. For instance, if I'm trying to upload it to a web or a personal application, should I block it? Should I allow it? Should I encrypt it? That is what this part talks about, and this is what we do from a force point perspective. Then importantly is, if you cannot see it, you cannot visualize it, you cannot take an action. Graphs, reports, logs, incidents, visibility, everything into one single dashboard or multiple dashboards, right? Wherein you can see the data being used, data being classified, the risk reports, the incidents, as well as the kind of a governance model. I will not say full-fledged governance model, but sort of a governance model which will help you to move from compliance to risk and to the governance. So governance, risk and compliance.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is the last one before I invite Vivek for our piece. So this is what we discussed over a period of time. Now, in marketing term, you call it security posture management approach for modern data security, but definitely focusing on discovery, classification, protection, zero trust, incident response time. And with that, I'll bring Vivek to cover the execution strategy. But Vivek, just before that, I'll ask one question. What are the 5 steps and stages which we have decoded in today's session? Yeah, just speak your name and.
My name is Gaurav. I am from Avasan. I'm a research analyst. So the 5 stages that we covered is discover, classify, prioritize, protect, and last one was monitor.
Okay. You can share it with the other people who has helped. So Vivek, over to you.
Thank you, Burjesh. Thank you for setting up the stage. I'll not take more than 5 to 7 minutes. You know what I have in with this. What we have done is we have learned about zero trust. We learned about data strategy. We learned about classification, DPDP Act. Or certain GRC compliances which are there. How we there are many tools and technologies which are available, but how to make sure these things are going to be in action actually. So from Hitachi Systems India, we have 2 offerings for our customers, wherein we can provide an virtual CISO for your organization who can assist with the mainstream CISO and help you compliance to making sure all those compliances, all your go to environment upgradation things are being taken care. So I'll cover that probably in a minute. So here we talk about get your expert guidance from a CISO. Sorry.
Yeah.
So get your expert guidance from a CISO. I'm not going to cover this in detail, but these are the things which generally CISO as within an organization in day-to-day life do. So at Hitachi we have a shared services model wherein we get you in virtual CISO on an hourly engagement wherein you can use them to assist your teams to make sure you are adhering to the guidelines of your industry, you are adhering to the security posture which you want to have within your organizations, and adhering to the GRC compliances as well. So these are the areas probably we have covered in our session, all these areas in the past discussions. But these are the areas where, these CISO community is going to be struggling with the skill within an organization. So, we are there to support this initiative of our customers. Then comes is Data Protection Act 2023. So we have an experience of almost 25 years into this particular area, where we were building companies GDPR compliant. So the same experience we have got into India. So we have our in-house team in Pune, who is assisting as a virtual team and manned by almost 25 member team across the globe, who is supporting this initiative for us. This team can be utilized, to make sure you have all the ingredients to abide with the Data Protection Act 2023A, wherein, you can start this journey with Hitachi, and, we will make sure we are going to be taking all those baby steps and making your organization adhering to these policies. And as I said, this is going to be an opportunity wherein, you can sign it for 200 hours of an engagement over the year with a specific scope, and we can deliver these services along with your team, or we will assist the data protection officer within an organization, so that he is going to have an access to the latest guidelines, and then he is going to be complying with those guidelines as well. So this is the primary and approach how we do it. So, and apart from this, we are going to be talk about, we are going to make your organization ready for step by step, because this we have good 2 years to get comply to this act. However, we can start this journey, and we can have help you even while you get across some breach, how to go and give this information to the agencies, governing agencies within the organization. We'll help you with form 65, form 74, and we'll give you that access, how you can safeguard interest of your organizations around to the queues.
One question maybe you can ask.
Yeah, so do you think this Data Privacy Act, which is DPDP 2023, is going to be coming in existence maybe another couple of months as soon as the board is being formed? Is going to be an requirement for every organization, or it's going to be limited to the organizations like who are into BFSI or ITITS, or it is going to go to a grocery shop also? Pardon? Only government
Stand up.
Government organizations are any which way they are.
Apply to each and every organization. The only caveat is that it will only apply to a digital format.
Yeah. So what about grocery shop or a shop which sir? Pardon? I'm talking about an individual who runs a grocery shop. He carries the individual data. Okay. So that's what I wanted to make sure, if the grocery shop guy is going to be coming under this bill. Yeah.
If they're storing in a digital format,
So generally, these days they send deliveries to your home. They have your address, they have your phone number, probably they have your email IDs also, right? And then mean they are storing somewhere, right? So this means yes. So we can. So it's going to go to a grocery shop as well, right? So this is going to be definitely. We have a time. We have yet this board has to be formed, but there's going to be lot of and it's not a technology driven things. You need to have an team who understand the law of the land, right? So at Hitachi, the team which is comprising of is the technology guys, lawyers, and the advocates, so that we will adhere end to end to these laws. When it comes to, so we can give it to him. It's go to the grocery shop. Any questions? Thank you, Prashant. We want to run this.
Just setting up a quiz. So to make sure that whatever you have seen in last 65, 70 minutes, you will able to brush up. And if you have brush up well, then you will be rewarded for that. So Jagdish is setting up. Jagdish.
The organization do.
There is no option of not doing it.
Okay.
You have to follow the law of the land. There's no question about it. I think the first thing is to create awareness among the employees and the management, and especially those who deal with digital data.
Right.
and digital personal data as well. So, and DSCI, for that matter, is doing a great job in this. I have attended a session which was done by DSCI. I think they are doing many such sessions.
Okay.
So, creating awareness is the first step. Of course, then you have to, I mean, get in touch with some experts. And,
Yeah. Okay.
Do you think, like, in 2018, the Google data breach happened? 2019, Facebook breach happened, correct? So knowing that their organization is very big, definitely they might be having, definitely they have the best of best technology
Correct.
to protect the data, right? But my concern is, in your
क्या
tool,
करना
if you do the data discovery,
नेक्स्ट कौन करेगा
when you identify the data which is there in the endpoint, right? After discovering the data, you are classifying it and you are protecting it, right? But my concern is, but still the data is there in the endpoint,
Right.
So
So-
cannot the organization, the big organization, we know that the organization who is 5,000 or 10,000 user organization, they are not as big as Facebook and Google, right? So do you think that the organization who is investing
Is the organization policy with respect to the data? Now, let's take an, I can say, for instance, any data which is, say, 1 year old needs to be moved. So you have remediation scripts, you have remediation policies where you can pick the data from that desktop laptop and move into a storage, no, centralized storage, and then you leave a watermark or a unique dropper file saying that this data has been moved because of XYZ policy, and this you can connect with the, say, security administrator, DOP officer to release that data back to your data. That can be done. That's why. Yes, yes, you can do a remediation. Yeah, yeah, you can. Remediation is always there. You can't do it without remediation. Yeah, please go ahead.
part, just log in into www.kahoot.it. If you already have a Kahoot app, just mention this game pin 9887821. Okay. So once all in, just let us know. We'll start the quiz. All are in. Anyone facing an issue? Not able to connect. Should we start? Anyone else? Okay, let's start. Jagdish. So there are close to 7 questions we have in this. It's the fastest finger first. You will see a question after 3, 2, 1 with 4 options. You have to select option. It's a DPO. So DPO stand for which? Data Prevention Officer, Data Protection Organization, Data Protection Officer, Data Privacy Officer. On your mobile, you will see the color code. You have to select that color code. Okay, so we see 9 correct, which is Data Privacy Officer. Next question. Okay, so the first, Ashish Saxena is definitely on the top. Let's move to the second question, Jagdish. Unauthorized processing of personal data or accidental disclosure, acquisition, destruction, loss of access is a part of Data Loss of IT Act 2023, Data Breach of DPDPA 2023, Data Breach ISO 27001 compliance, none of the above. So yeah, the correct is data breach of DPDPA, talk about accidental disclosure, acquisition, destruction and loss of access. So let's see after second who is on the top. Aditi is on the top, AK and then Satish. Next question. Adding labels to the data in metadata of document can be achieved by, I think I'm expecting all to choose the correct one. So it's data protection, data identification, data classification, none of the above. Five, four, three, two, one. Oh, 22 are correct. Good. Maybe I have to meet this 4-2-1, other 7-1 after the session. Yeah, so we have Aditi still leading the score. Next one, Jagdish. What tools will help organizations accelerate their DPDPA 2023 adherence? Data classification, data visibility, data leakage prevention, or data encryption, data visibility, data leakage prevention, or data classification, data masking, data leakage prevention, or none of the above. Choose the right one. All the three looks very similar. Yeah, so 17 or 4 are correct. Data encryption, data visibility, and data leakage prevention. Oh, Aditi is not losing the ground. She is on still first. Where is Aditi? Oh, I know. I think you don't know the answers, right? Before it starts. Why is it necessary to check for rot data? It is required for compliance, not necessary to check for rot, for the risk it can pose, none of the above. So rot is redundant, outdated, trivial data. So what do you think is the answer? Oh, for the risk it can pose. Absolutely. 21 are correct. Oh, Aditi still leading the ground. Second last. Can Forcepoint DLP read labels in the metadata of document? It's a quite easy one. Oh, great. So 3 still saying false. So maybe we have to discuss. Aditi still on the top. Last question. Is RAP is based on user behavior? True or false? I think today you got a very easy paper, Deepak. Oh, true. 26-7 says false. So now can we have a final top 3? So on the third point, Nishant, maybe you can come in front. Pankaj, and I know the first one. It should not be Aditi. Oh, Aditi, it's you. So Pankaj, Aditi. Jagdish. Can you come on the stage, please? Vivek sir. This is second. Yeah. So this is for Nishant. Where is our guy? Ayush. This is for Pankaj. Kalsa. You can stay here. We can click a photo. Yeah. Come, Jagdish. Come. Come, Ranjit. Come. Wait, Jagdish.
Sorry.
Marketing. How you forget marketing?
No. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thanks for your patience, for listening to us, and please feel free to connect. We can connect offline.
Thank you.
And discuss. Ranjit, over to you.